There are stories that need only to be told once to leave a lasting mark on the human mind. In the quiet countryside of Tennessee, one family was drawn into a nightmare so profound that not even the most fervent prayers could drive it away. From whispers in the dark, to mysterious assaults, to the hidden secrets that may have been concealed beneath the very tale of the haunting itself, our journey today will open the door to one of the most chilling and hotly debated legends in American history, the story of the Bell Witch. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. In 1804, when the shifting seasonal winds still carried the hopes of pioneers, John Bell and his wife, Lucy Williams Bell, left their home in North Carolina to embark on a grueling journey toward a promised land, the Red River area of Tennessee. The road they traveled was not only long and unforgiving, but also symbolized the unyielding spirit of those who believed they could build a new life with their own hands. And indeed, after many years of tireless farming and cultivation, the Bell family quickly rose to become successful landowners, respected and admired by the community. Yet, as if by a cruel twist of fate, the very prosperity that John Bell had built would also become the seed of a tragedy soon to unfold. Among the families who had left North Carolina during that time, there was one name that history would forever tie to the downfall of the Bells: the Batts family. In the early years, relations between the two families remained outwardly cordial, but by around 1816, tensions began to surface when Frederick Batts, the patriarch of the Batts family, suffered a serious workplace accident on the very land he had worked so hard to clear. The accident left Frederick with permanent injuries, making him unable to continue working. The Batts family, already not well off, now fell into deeper hardship. Driven to desperation, Frederick was forced to sell off portions of his precious land to survive. One of those parcels eventually ended up in the hands of John Bell, and it was this transaction that unknowingly lit the first spark of hatred. According to Kate Batts, Frederick's wife, John Bell had taken advantage of their dire situation to purchase land at a price far below its true value. In her fury, Kate swore that she would make the Bell family pay dearly for their greed. Another dispute soon erupted when John Bell purchased a young enslaved girl from Benjamin Batts, Frederick's brother. The girl was too young to be taken immediately, so Bell agreed to leave her with her mother for a time. But when John Bell returned to collect the girl, Benjamin reneged on their agreement and demanded a higher price than originally settled. After a heated argument, Bell had no choice but to sell the child back to Benjamin at the inflated price, deepening the rift between the two families even further. In John Bell's mind, these transactions were closed, and he hoped that the troubles with the Batts family would end there. But reality proved otherwise. Not long after, Benjamin Batts quietly filed a lawsuit against John Bell, accusing him of abuse and fraud in the transaction. Unaware of the lawsuit, John Bell failed to appear in court, leading to a default judgment in Benjamin's favor. When news of the judgment reached Red River and spread throughout the community, the local church intervened, and despite Bell's vehement protests, he was expelled from the congregation. Some believed that this event had flung open the door for darker forces to step into John Bell's life and that of his family. On the other side of the feud, Kate Batts gradually rose to become the head of the Batts household. With her coarse manner, loud outbursts, and simmering resentment, she became an outcast within the community. Her bizarre behavior during church services fueled rumors that she was practicing witchcraft, a terrifying accusation at the time. Though few dared to confront Kate directly, most residents of Red River quietly believed that the calamities befalling her family were divine punishment, retribution from the Almighty against one who had tainted the purity of faith. Yet, whether born from whispers or rooted in truth, no one could have foreseen that the feud of those early years would soon evolve into one of the most haunting stories in American history. In 1817, not long after being expelled from the church, John Bell once again faced something he could never have anticipated. While hunting on his own land late one afternoon, Bell happened upon a strange creature, something unlike anything he had ever seen in his lifetime. The creature had the body of a large dog, but its head resembled that of a rabbit, and its entire form was covered in jet black fur. Shocked by the bizarre sight, Bell immediately raised his rifle and fired. But when the smoke cleared, the creature had vanished completely, leaving no trace on the ground. Being a practical and resilient man, John Bell chose to remain silent, unwilling to burden his family with the story. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to dismiss it, strange occurrences continued to plague his household. Not long after the encounter with the mysterious creature, the Bell family began to hear odd sounds during the night. At first, it was only light tapping, as if small stones were being thrown against the outer walls of the house. John and his sons would often grab lanterns and search around the farmstead, but they never found any sign of an intruder. As the October nights wore on, the sounds not only persisted, but grew bolder. The family began hearing the heavy dragging of something across the wooden floor, the scratching of claws against the walls, and even suffocating gnawing noises, as if giant rats were chewing at the bedposts. Every time they lit lamps and searched, everything remained still and undisturbed. Sleep became increasingly elusive, and the strain on each family member's nerves deepened with each passing night. In the early days, John Bell still tried to maintain a facade of calm for his family. He suspected that perhaps the Batts family was behind the disturbances, seeking to harass them. But when the sounds began to manifest inside the house itself, even he could no longer find a rational explanation. One night, Elizabeth Betsy Bell, John's 14-year-old daughter, awoke in the middle of the night to the now familiar noises. But this time, when she sat up in fear, she realized her hair had been tightly tied to the bedpost with strange knots. As she struggled in panic to free herself, an invisible hand seized her and slapped her violently across the face. Her screams shattered the silence of the night, bringing the family rushing into her room, where they were stunned to see the red hand-shaped welts still imprinted across her cheeks. The horror did not end there. Within days, the other children in the house began to exhibit strange bruises on their legs and faces, as if they had been beaten. John Bell, seeing no other option, urged his family to maintain absolute silence about what was happening. He feared that if word of these events leaked to the outside world, the family's honor would be irreparably destroyed. Yet, no matter what they did, the bizarre and terrifying events continued to descend upon them. In the long, sleepless nights, when the dim lamplight reflected off the gaunt, fearful faces of his family, John turned to his longtime friend, James Johnston, one of the family's most trusted neighbors. John Bell confided everything to James, from the mysterious sounds to the invisible violence inflicted upon his children. Though a devout and practical man, James could not ignore the urgency in his friend's account. He and his wife quickly agreed to stay at the Bell home to witness the events firsthand. On their very first night, as everyone gathered in prayer, the house seemed to hold its breath under the weight of tension. And then, as darkness enveloped the home and the flickering lamplight faded, the familiar sounds rose once again. The sudden pounding against the walls, the frantic scratching at the doors, and the heavy dragging footsteps shuffling down the hallway. There was no longer any doubt. What the Bell family had endured was no hoax. With the courage that defined him, Johnston loudly commanded the unseen entity lurking in the darkness to reveal its identity. In that moment, a low, mournful whisper echoed through the air. Over the next several nights, Johnston and his wife joined the Bell family in prolonged prayers, hoping to drive out the force that had imprisoned the home. But all their efforts were like thin wisps of smoke against a raging storm. After days of witnessing the phenomena with his own eyes, Johnston had no choice but to advise John Bell that he must seek the help of the wider community. Though John initially hesitated, fearing the scorn of public opinion and the ruination of his family's reputation, he eventually saw reason. And so, news of the haunted house at Red River began to spread. At first, it was little more than whispered rumors exchanged in taverns and open-air markets. But soon, the tale of the Bell home ignited the curiosity of the entire region, across Tennessee and beyond. From humble farmers to wealthy merchants, from dignified ministers to daring adventurers, crowds of people made their way to the Bell farm, all eager to witness the impossible with their own eyes. And if at first the entity had confined itself to nighttime disturbances, it now shed all pretense. It began to speak aloud, answering questions, telling stories, and even mocking without mercy those who dared to express skepticism. Yet strangely, despite standing before hundreds of mortal witnesses, this malevolent force seemed to reserve its true hatred for only one man, John Bell. The storm of attention reached its peak when news of the bizarre events found its way to one of America's most renowned figures, General Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States. Driven by curiosity and the daring spirit of a seasoned soldier, Jackson decided to lead a small contingent of men to Red River to confront for himself the entity that people were now whispering about as a demon living among us. What he and his men would face, however, would leave a deeper impression than any battlefield they had ever encountered. Andrew Jackson was not a man easily intimidated. With a past spent commanding soldiers through some of the bloodiest battles, having faced swords and gunfire on the battlefield, he knew that fear was something that simply did not exist. But what awaited him at Red River would prove to be a challenge for which no amount of military experience could prepare him. Jackson and his entourage made their way toward the Bell farm with the mindset of men ready to expose a fraud. They brought with them provisions, weapons, and the pride of those who had been tempered by fire and battle. Among them was a soldier who carried silver bullets, boasting openly that he would use them to bring down the ghost that was sowing terror here. However, from the very first steps onto the land of the Bell family, Jackson and his men encountered things that defied explanation. As their wagon, loaded with supplies and equipment, neared the farm, the wheels abruptly locked. The horses, seasoned and accustomed to muddy, difficult terrain, suddenly reared back in fear and refused to move. No matter how much the soldiers pushed, pulled, or whipped them, the horses would not budge. It was as if the wagon had been pinned to the earth by some unseen force no one could resist. As the group stood bewildered, a chilling, childlike giggle floated through the air. Sensing the heavy and dangerous atmosphere, Andrew Jackson, with the keen instinct of a seasoned warrior, ordered the soldier with the silver bullets to cease his foolish boasting. He offered an apology to the invisible entity for the offense, and almost immediately, the wagon began to move again, as if nothing had happened. The party finally reached the Bell property and set up camp, intending to stay for several days to observe. But on the very first night, what they experienced went far beyond anything they had imagined. The darkness did not merely settle over the farm with oppressive silence. It seemed to come alive, slithering through the rooms, slipping through every crack and corner. Whispers, phantom knocks at doors, and sudden gusts of icy air swept through the house, even though every door and window was firmly shut, together forming a terrifying symphony that none of Jackson's men could deny. The hardened soldiers, men who had withstood the horrors of battle, suddenly found themselves uneasy and fearful, like lost children groping through the dark. Some claimed to have seen pale figures gliding through the hallways. Others felt invisible hands tugging at their coats as they slept. By the next morning, before the first light of dawn, Andrew Jackson gave the order for the entire group to return to Nashville. No official reports were written, no public meetings convened to discuss the reasons for the retreat. But according to legend, a single sentence Jackson uttered has been remembered ever since. "I would rather face the entire British Army than spend another night under the Bell family's roof." The winter of 1820 descended upon Red River with a biting cold, carrying with it howling winds that swept across the barren fields and shrieked around the wooden house of the Bell family. Lucy Bell, the steadfast woman who had helped John Bell build their life on this land, suddenly fell ill. The doctor diagnosed her with pleurisy, a dangerous illness at a time when medicine had few means of effective treatment. The Bell family, already accustomed to sleepless nights, haunted by an invisible fear, now found themselves consumed with worry for their beloved mother and wife. Yet, paradoxically, while the rest of the family was besieged by relentless torment, Lucy received a strange form of favor from the entity known as the Bell Witch. During the long nights when fever ravaged her frail body, a soft voice would fill the room, singing hymns with a gentle, soothing tone. And it did not stop there. Lucy was also gifted with curious offerings, clusters of ripe grapes and hazelnuts. Fruits that should have been impossible to find amid the brutal winter appeared mysteriously beside her sickbed, and somehow, against all medical reasoning of the time, Lucy's health began to recover. While a faint glimmer of hope flickered by Lucy's bedside, on the other side of the house, John Bell was quietly descending into a journey from which there would be no return. The man who had once been a symbol of resilience now grew sluggish and weary. His mind often clouded over, his hands trembled uncontrollably, and seizures of unknown origin began to rack his body whenever night fell. By the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found motionless in his bed. The family quickly discovered a small glass vial filled with a cloudy, foul-smelling liquid beside John's bed, a sharp, pungent odor rising from it, matching the strange smell that had emanated from John's mouth when he was found. As confusion and panic erupted among his loved ones, a familiar voice echoed through the room. "I fixed his medicine last night. I gave him a big dose. He'll never get out of that bed again." It was the unmistakable declaration of the entity that everyone had come to know as the Bell Witch. And thus, for the first time in American history, a supernatural force was recorded as the cause of a human death, a death that not only shocked the Red River community, but also shook an entire generation's faith in the boundary between the real and the unreal. After John Bell's death, the atmosphere at the Red River farm seemed to lighten somewhat. The strange sounds, the nightly invisible assaults, and the mocking laughter all ceased, leaving behind a heavy silence within the wooden house. The Bell family began to hope that they had finally been freed, that the spirit which had sown fear and loss had at last been satisfied in its quest for revenge. But they were wrong. In the spring of 1821, the Bell Witch returned. Elizabeth Betsy Bell, the beautiful and vibrant young daughter who had so often been the target of past torments, now faced a new trial. A local young man, Joshua Gardner, respectful, kind, and well-regarded, had proposed marriage to Betsy. It should have been a joyous occasion, a fresh beginning for a girl who had endured so much sorrow. But only days after the proposal, Betsy encountered a haunting sight. While walking through a barren field, she saw the figure of a small girl dressed in a green frock, hovering eerily among the bare branches. The child did not cry or laugh. It merely gazed at Betsy with empty, hollow eyes before vanishing like smoke. Soon after, Betsy began to hear whispers carried on the wind. Vague, chilling threats warning her that she must not marry Joshua Gardner. At last, unable to withstand the mounting, unseen pressure, the young woman was forced to announce the cancellation of her engagement, leaving a deep wound in the hearts of both herself and Gardner. Joshua Gardner, who had once dreamed of a warm home beside Betsy, left Red River behind. Many believed that the breaking of Betsy and Gardner's engagement marked the final act of direct interference by the Bell Witch in the lives of the Bell family. Yet, there were also whispers that the entity had never truly gone away. As the tales of the Bell Witch gradually faded in the decades that followed, the people of Red River, and later the town of Adams, continued to live under the shadow of the legend their ancestors had endured. Yet deep within each person lingered an unspoken question. Had those horrifying events truly happened? Or were they merely the products of imagination, of stories woven and reshaped through generations? One of the greatest challenges in attempting to uncover the truth about the Bell Witch lies in the context of the era itself. In the early 19th century, most residents of Tennessee were still illiterate, and stories were passed down orally, each shaped subtly by the teller. By the time these accounts were finally committed to writing, no one could say with certainty where fact ended and embellishment began. Some modern researchers argue that the entire series of events surrounding the Bell Witch may have been an elaborate facade meant to conceal more earthly schemes. They point to the fact that Lucy Bell, the devoted wife of John Bell, was the sister of John Williams Jr., who was the father of Kate Williams Batts. This blood relationship has fueled theories suggesting that Lucy and Kate might have forged a secret pact to eliminate John Bell. If so, could it truly be a coincidence that Lucy Bell was the only member of the family who was never targeted by the supernatural assaults that plagued the others? However, other questions arise from the relationships surrounding Betsy Bell. Richard Powell, the respected and remarkably educated schoolteacher of the area, had long expressed romantic interest in Betsy, even when he was still married. When Powell's wife died in 1821, coinciding with Betsy's broken engagement to Joshua Gardner, many began to suspect that it was Powell himself, armed with his knowledge of human psychology and stagecraft, who had orchestrated the so-called hauntings to sabotage the engagement and draw Betsy back toward him. No matter how plausible these theories may sound, it remains undeniable that Richard Powell, possessing intellect and capabilities far beyond the average person of his time, would have been fully capable of creating sophisticated illusions designed to instill fear in the impressionable mind of a young girl like Betsy. Even so, not everyone believes that the Bell Witch was merely a fabrication for personal gain. There are still those who contend that Kate Batts, in a fit of rage and despair, had truly summoned a dark force beyond human control. Modern accounts have also made it difficult to completely dismiss such suspicions. Bob Bell, a descendant of the Bell family, recalled vividly a chilling event from his childhood. One night, his grandmother, overcome with terror, summoned his father after hearing strange noises in the house. When they investigated, everything seemed normal until they reached the kitchen. The cabinet, which had been locked tight, now stood wide open, and the family's treasured china lay scattered across the floor. Yet, strangely, not a single plate had broken, as if some invisible hand had carefully placed them down. Another story speaks of Tim Henson, a local historian and the curator of the town museum. According to him, visitors were always warned not to take anything from the grounds of the Bell family property. But one man, during a visit, secretly pocketed a small stone from the famous Bell Cave. Within 3 days, he lost his job, lost his wife, and ultimately lost his home. Was it mere coincidence? Or is the Bell Witch still there? Do you believe this story could be true? Have you ever heard of anything quite like it? If so, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue joining us on these journeys into the world's unsolved mysteries, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We'll see you in the next story.